Good afternoon, everybody.
Afternoon.
Nice to see you all. Hi, Sanheshki. Thanks for chatting. So welcome to English 201 today. This is Tuesday of week 3. Just a little class business. Today we're going to talk about literary theory and gender theory. And then on Thursday, we'll talk a little bit about the first paper. So you can start thinking about what you might like to do. And hi, Tasha. And then what I'll be asking you to do probably a little bit next week is to do a little drafting during our class time. So you'll have an opportunity to write a little bit and talk a little bit about your ideas for paper 1. And the draft of paper 1 is due a week from Friday. So week 4, Friday. Are there questions, comments, or concerns about any of that? Okay. I think there was, the exercise from week 2. I am in the middle of getting those scored. And if the summary looks good and the close reading looks good and has a kind of interpretive idea and the discussion of the adaptation looks good, folks get 30 points. Each of those 3 components is worth 10 points. So if I'm looking for some additional work, I'll identify what it is and indicate that you can earn points by revising based on my feedback. One thing I would encourage you to do is revise because we're going to do similar work throughout the term, and now might be a good time to, if you were unsure what I was looking for, or if you're, if you're maybe, what may be happening partly is it's not just a analysis and critical thinking issue, but it may also be a writing issue. That what sometimes happens is when I ask students for ideas, they sort of talk around the idea rather than actually talking about the idea. And if that's happening in the language, I'll ask you, I'll say the language is vague and can you give me some more detail? So it might be a good moment to just to try a revision, just so you can kind of teach yourself what needs to happen so you can be successful in the writing of this class. Yeah, and I can't know necessarily the skills you bring in till I see what you're doing. So that's an opportunity for me to teach you. And I would encourage you to just take the feedback, turn it back around, give it back to me, and let me rescore it. So I've only got a few of those done. I had the opportunity suddenly to get my daughter COVID vaccine today. So I had to take time yesterday to clear my schedule to make that happen. And then this morning I had to haul her over to Pendleton and back. So anyway, that sort of ate up the time that I had for grading, unfortunately. So the feedback is coming, but it may be today or tomorrow before I get fully completed. Okay, other questions, comments, concerns? Okay, so I'm going to talk just briefly about literary theory and gender theory, and then we'll take a look at the end of Act 1 and also at Act 2. What I would like to do is invite you to read today. I do have a number of, I actually need a certain minimum of folks reading to make this work. So I'm going to put a link in the chat to a sign-up sheet. And I'm just going to let you pick the character you want to read. And there it is. And you'll see when you click on it that some roles have like 1 line. Some roles have like 50 lines. So I tried to kind of quantify what you'd be in for if you signed up for a particular role for today. If you are comfortable reading, like many of you have already been reading for a couple weeks, please take one of the larger roles so that folks who are less comfortable can grab the smaller ones. That would be awesome. So go ahead and have a look at that while I'm talking about theory. And then when I'm done with that discussion, I'll go back, have a look at it. If we have enough people to do some reading today, we will. If not, I'll handle the instruction differently than I planned. What I really like to do is sit in a classroom with all of you and just read the play. It's really fun to kind of just do what actors would do, right? Give a cold reading and kind of see where the play is headed. But if we can't do that today, that's okay. We'll do something else. Okay, so you may have heard a conversation about literary theory in the past, and perhaps in a 100 level literature class, or in if you've had that kind of a class at the college level, or maybe in high school. And the way to think about literary theory is it's a theory that addresses how we read, addresses how we interpret, addresses how we evaluate literature. It may also relate to how literature is written. It may relate to how we think characters and plots operate. And it may have to do too with the culture around reading, like it might have to do with the history of literature in a particular culture. It might have to do with readership and marketing of literature. So literary theory can be really broad. It's essentially the way we talk in the abstract about how texts make meaning. And so I want to mention that there are a lot of different kinds of theory. And as a reader and interpreter of literature, you may choose to practice some of them and not choose others. So already, probably depending on your interests in reading, you've oriented toward some particular basics of literary analysis, right? So as a theorist, I value close reading, right? So I am forcing that theoretical approach on you as my student, because I think that's where your evidence comes from. So in a sense, close reading is a must, but it is a theoretical approach that assumes that the details of the text are worth unpacking and exploring in order to see how we are reacting to the things we're reading. Not everyone feels the need for that. I would say that's maybe 95% of theorists do work with close reading in some way or another. There also have been periods of time when close reading was the way, like there was nothing outside the text for many theorists in the middle of the 20th century, right? It was wrong to go and try to find connections outside the poem or the play, because the text should stand for itself, right? So there's a theoretical assumption that the only thing necessary to interpretation is that primary literary text. I think that's called New Critics, and that particular theoretical orientation fell by the wayside, partly because one could argue that we never can possibly exclude everything from our interpretive process. You know, maybe what we had for breakfast today affects the way Julius Caesar is coming across. Maybe the way we think about upper class and lower class affects the way we as readers interact with the text. Maybe our politics affects the way we interact with the text, right? So suddenly the reader and the reader's life orients toward the text and helps the reader understand why he, she, they read the text the way they do. That's a reader-oriented kind of theory that assumes that the reader's background is fundamental to why readers read differently. Part of the problem with the New Critics is they thought that really any good interpretation would arrive at the same interpretation. So maybe if you're one kind of person, right? Maybe if you're all older white men of a certain generation, of a certain class level, who are lodged at the university, maybe they would arrive at the same meaning, all of them the same, but I don't think so. So even among a smaller group of sort of like common lived experience kind of people would still probably interpret differently. So So one could argue, okay, well, we use close reading and we think about the reader. My high school English teacher, Mrs. Jackson, who I had for 3 years and was in love with Laurence Olivier, which is why we watched and read Shakespeare all the time because he was in like every Shakespeare movie. She would always bring in the author's biography, right? So for her, her theoretical approach was that it mattered who wrote the text. His life mattered, his historical moment mattered, and if you didn't know those things, you were missing out on some rich background that would help you better understand what the text was about. So that's an author-centered kind of theory. Okay, so far we've talked about the text, the reader, and the author, right? So the author creates the text, delivers it to the reader, and the reader has an experience, right? And they're theories that value those sort of corners of the rhetorical triangle and to different extents. I tend to be interested, of course, in the author and the author's background. That's why I provided information about Shakespeare in Canvas. But I am more interested in what readers do with Shakespeare than I am about Shakespeare himself. So that's my theoretical orientation. Okay, there's also other kinds of theories that get drawn into literature, some of them coming in from the outside. So we can think about, for example, how theories of history affect the way we read texts that were generated centuries ago, right? So there may be some theories that arise in your history classes that we could apply to the reading of Shakespeare. We might think about theories associated with class, right? With income and with power associated with different levels of stratification in a society. And perhaps some theories related to those differences would help us better understand the text. We could also draw on psychology, right? So we could draw on theories, Freudian theories, the Oedipus complex, the id, the ego, the superego. Those would be really fun to try to become the lens through which we looked at something like Julius Caesar, right? Are we seeing competition in a character among the id, ego, superego, right? And why might that be important? Is someone still locked in their Oedipal moment, maybe not having developed beyond that moment? So there are ways in which we can talk about psychology, for example, affecting what we read. Today, we're going to talk just a little bit about gender. So the reading and discussion that we do will orient toward issues of masculinity and femininity in particular. And Taming of the Shrew would have been a good play for gender ideas as well, but Julius Caesar is surprisingly interesting to look at through a gender lens, because there's so much invocation of what it means to be a man, right? That in making decisions these characters make about their politics and how they relate to Caesar and how Caesar sees himself as a leader, they are using gender-loaded kinds of words all the time. So it's interesting to see how they construct their choices based on how they're aligning with their masculinity. And we can look at the female characters too, in the ways in which they're negotiating their role, right? So of course, women were not part of politics in this period, and they were sort of sidelined in the domestic sphere, as of course women have been for centuries. But watch them, right? Watch what they do with the power they have, and let's see how they wield it, right? So we can look at some of those things. Okay, I'm going to pause just a moment and ask you, are there questions about literary theory before I go into gender theory in a little more depth? You're all asleep by now, I can tell. Okay, so you probably also know gender theory in general, right? The way that I like to think about it is our gender has to do with kind of the invisible boxes we are in, right? As in terms of our the way in which we orient toward masculinity, femininity, non-binary, and the pressure society exerts on us to sort of conform to what we appear to be from the outside, right? So we can think about the sort of stereotype of masculinity, men needing to be strong, needing to be breadwinners, needing to be courageous, needing to be, you know, smart, clear thinkers, reasoners, all those kinds of things, hard workers. And we can think about the box, little invisible box, putting pressure on men to kind of toe the line in relationship to the sort of norm of masculinity. We can think about a similar box for women, right? That women are expected to be more caring, more nurturing, more emotional. They're expected to be kind of, you know, the mothers and sisters caring for their friends and extended family. And they're often expected to, you know, if someone needs to give up a job to be home during COVID with children, right, the expectation often is that the woman will do that, right, will sacrifice a career for the family. And so there's a lot of pressure on women to be inside that box. And maybe the reason Catherine was so angry, right, in Taming of the Shrew is that that box was putting a lot of pressure on her to be like Bianca, who fit the box really well. So it would be really fun to kind of go back and unpack that gender situation. And so, of course, you probably know the history of, you know, modern feminism moved from changing laws, right? Through the early part of the 20th century, women got the vote in the US in 1918. By the middle of the 20th century, feminists realized that just changing the laws wasn't enough because the norms were still oppressive to women, particularly following World War II, right? When men came back, women had, you know, all these kinds of crazy jobs during the war to support the war effort. Men came back, took those jobs, and women went back into the domestic spaces and had a taste for something else that they wanted access to, right? So the middle of the 20th century was definitely about trying to change some norms so that women had more opportunities. And I think the kind of the place where feminism is today has to do with intersectionality and the idea that power isn't just about gender, right? It's also about sexuality. It's about race, class, ethnicity, ability, all the different categories that through which people experience their power in the system in which we're operating. That growth of feminism has allowed us to start to notice and critique the operation of gender in our culture. And again, it's kind of fun to see how the literature that we read connects with some of those ideas. So we'll be talking a little bit about that today. Okay, again, I'm going to pause, checking in. How you doing? Questions, comments, concerns? Okay, so I'm going to just take a look at the sign-up sheet. All right, it looks like we've got just enough. I think we could probably do this. Let me think just a second. I think we can read with what we've got. Thank you very much for signing up. I think we'll be able to do that today. Okay, so we're going to go, and I have 4 different sections of the play I'd like to take a look at. And again, I guess as you're listening to people reading, definitely listen for meaning, like what's happening, but also listen for gender. And when we come to a stop at the end of each section, I'll ask you to do some typing in the chat about your thoughts regarding that sequence, particularly gender stuff, but it could be other things too. As you're listening, feel free to start chatting. You don't have to wait till we're done reading to be. In fact, you might want to catch some things as we move forward. Okay, so the first sequence I'd like to take a look at is in Act 1, Scene 3. I'm going to pull it up in my, let's see. Maybe I should just, let me write down who's doing what, and then I'll pull it up. Okay. Okay, now I've got everybody written down. I'm going to pull up the play. So I'm going to Act 1, Scene 3. And this scene is between Cassius and Casca. And we'll start around line 48. Okay, so if you remember the beginning of Act 1, Scene 3, there's a lot of like omens that people are witnessing, like strange fires and odd things going on with the stars, et cetera, et cetera. So they're kind of feeling a little bit like thunderstormy. The atmosphere is unsettled. And the guys who are starting to form into a group of conspirators, right, who are committing treason, right, are starting to gather together and talk about what their plans might be. So Cassius, we looked at in class yesterday with some depth, is talking with Casca about some of their concerns. And I think we'll start, I've got Dakota reading Cassius. I'll take Casca, and we'll go through about line 124. So Dakota, if you want to go ahead and start with those that have known the earth, that would be great.
Those that have known the earth so full of faults, for my part, I have walked about the streets, submitting me unto the perilous night, and thus unbraced, Casca, as you see, have bared my bosom to the thunderstone. And when the cross blue lightning seemed to open the breast of heaven, I did present myself even in the aim and very flash of it.
But wherefore did you so much tempt the heavens? Is it the part of men to fear and tremble when the most mighty gods by tokens send such dreadful heralds to astonish us?
You are dull, Casca, and those sparks of life that should be in a Roman you do want, or else you use not. You look pale and gaze and put on fear and cast yourself in wonder to see the strange impatience of the heavens. But if you would consider the true cause, why all these fires? Why all these gliding ghosts? Why birds and beasts from quality and kind? Why old men, fools, and children calculate? Why all these things change from their ordinance, their natures, and preformed faculties to monstrous qualities? Why, you shall find that heaven hath infused them with these spirits to make them instruments of fear and warning unto some monstrous state. Now, could I, Casca, name to thee a man most like this dreadful night, that thunders, lightnings, opens graves, and roars as doth the lion in the Capitol, a man no mightier than thyself or me in personal action, yet prodigious groan and fearful as these strange eruptions are?
'Tis Caesar that you mean, is it not, Cassius?
Let it be who it is, for Romans now have thews and limbs like their ancestors. But woe the while, our fathers' minds are dead, and we are governed with our mother's spirits. Our yoke and sufferance show us womanish.
Indeed, they say the senators tomorrow mean to establish Caesar as a king, and he shall wear his crown by sea and land in every place, save here in Italy.
I know where I will wear this dagger then. Cassius from bondage will deliver Cassius. Therein, you gods, you make the weak most strong. Therein, you gods, you tyrants do defeat. Nor stony tower, nor walls of beaten brass, nor airless dungeon, nor strong links of iron can be retentive to the strength of spirit. But life, being weary of those worldly bars, never lacks power to dismiss itself. If I know this, know all the world besides, that part of tyranny that I do bear, I can shake off at pleasure.
So can I. So every bondman in his own hand bears the power to cancel his captivity.
And why should Caesar be a tyrant then? Poor man, I know he would not be a wolf, but that he sees the Romans are but sheep. He were no lion, or not Romans' hinds. Those that with haste will make will make a mighty fire, begin it with weak straws. What trash is Rome? What rubbish? What offal when it serves the base matter to illuminate so vile a thing as Caesar? But O grief, where hast thou led me? I perhaps speak this before a willing bondman, that I know my answer must be made. But I am armed, and dangers are to me indifferent.
You speak to Casca, and to such a man that is no fleeting telltale. Hold my hand. Be factious for redress of all these griefs, and I will set this foot of mine as far as who goes furthest.
There's a bargain made. Now you know, or now know you, Casca, I have moved already some certain of the noblest minded Romans to undergo with me an enterprise of honorable dangerous consequence, and I do know by this they stay for me in Pompey's porch. For now, this fearful night, there is no stir or walking in the streets, and the complexion of the element in favors, like the work we have in hand, most bloody, fiery, and most terrible.
Good, thank you. Okay, so let's chat just a bit. What did you notice about this men's exchange? Do you see elements of it that are gendered?
The way that he was getting him to be on his side was to mock him for being a man and not mock him for being a woman. Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone is womanish these days, right? Obeying the tyrant. Yeah, right? And Casca was like, I don't think so. Yeah, good. What else? What else did you notice?
He's sort of toying with him, like he's like, oh, you're probably not able to like see, or if you are, you're just choosing not to. It's just kind of like toying with him, like trying to get him to defend himself, I think.
Yeah, right? He's trying to get a rise out of him. And Cassius is very much like, when people start talking about themselves in the third person, I start to worry, but right, he's kind of like, well, I'm brave. I'm up for this challenge. Bring it on, right? Yeah. Good. Others? Other folks notice?
I just feel like this entire play, it like demonstrates like the ideology and like the dangers of going into that masculine man ideology, which Cassius, at least in all the play, well, when I saw it, you know, he really revs up the people and other people, I mean, other characters later. Oh, you're not manly enough. If you're a true man,
Yeah.
you're going to fight for what I believe in, because that's clearly what defines you as a man.
Right. And if you're not a man, you're a woman or a slave. Yeah, I'm seeing good ideas in the chat too, right? The animals referenced, right? The lion is like a man, right? So they're either hypermasculine or hyperfeminine. Yeah, they call women fearful, right? Upon a heap, 100 ghastly women transformed with their fear, who swore they saw men all in fire walk up and down the streets, right? So men are on fire and the women are like, oh no, right? Yeah. And of course, this, I want to say that one way to challenge a man and to make him act based on that box, that invisible box, is to challenge his masculinity, as you've all been saying. And you can see some of that, I want to say, kind of like an insecurity in Cassius in that speech we were looking at where he was telling these stories about Caesar, right? That somehow he feels insecure about his own masculinity because Caesar has achieved this high position despite not being as strong as Cassius. So he's baffled by, his own lack of success as a man, right? And maybe that's partly why he's taking this rebellious action to kind of prove to himself and others that he's got it, right? He's got the masculinity that he needs. Good. Okay, so we're going to skip forward to Act 2, Scene 1. And this is the one where I need a lot of people. So I'm just going to double check. So Dakota, you'll keep going as Cassius. I'm going to, let me think for a second. I'm going to pick up Brutus. And let me have, let's see. And then Landry's got Cinna. Jill has Metellus. Oh, I wrote something down, but now I can't read it. Trebonius. Nakia, I think Nakia has Trebonius. And so I need someone to read a couple lines of Decius, or one line. He's got like one line in the scene. And then I need someone to read a couple lines of Casca. And people that already have roles can pick those up. So for example, if Landry wouldn't mind reading Cinna and Casca, and maybe Nakia could read Trebonius and Decius. Is that okay?
I can try to. I'm at work, so that's why I picked the one thing. So I just don't want to leave anyone hanging. But if I can, I definitely will.
And if you don't jump in, I'll just do it. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Sanheshki, about the comment regarding Christian values. I mean, there's always, I think, in Shakespeare an odd, right? Because Shakespeare's writing from a Christian context, looking back at a Roman context. So there's this interesting blend. So that might be worth talking about some more. Yeah. Okay, let me pull up the play. Okay, so this is Act 2, Scene 1. And we're going to take a look at lines 125 through 205. Just scrolling down a little bit here. So again, these are the conspirators. Yeah, these are the conspirators who've gathered at Brutus's house. And we'll see what happens. So we'll I'll start with Brutus, and then we'll read down. I think Trebonius has the last line and has only one set of 2 lines. So when we get to Trebonius, we'll know we're done. No, not an oath. If not the face of men, the sufferance of our souls, the time's abuse. If these be motives weak, break off betimes, and every man hence to his idle bed. So let high-sighted tyranny range on till each man drop by lottery. But if these, as I am sure they do, bear fire enough to kindle cowards and to steal with valor the melting spirits of women, then, countrymen, what need we any spur but our own cause to prick us to redress? What other bond than secret Romans that have spoke the word and will not palter? And what other oath than honesty to honesty engaged, that this shall be, or we will fall for it? Swear priests and cowards and men, I don't know what that word is, cautellus, old feeble carrions and such suffering souls that welcome wrongs, unto bad causes swear such creatures as men doubt, but do not stain the even virtue of our enterprise, nor the insuppressive metal of our spirits. To think that or our cause or our performance did need an oath, when every drop of blood that every Roman bears and nobly bears is guilty of a several bastardy if he do break the smallest particle of any promise that hath passed from him.
But of Cicero, shall we sound him? I think you will stand very strong with us.
Let us not leave him out. No, by no means.
Oh, let us have him, for his silver hairs will purchase us a good opinion, and by men's voices to commend our deeds. It shall be said his judgment ruled our hands. Our youths and wildness shall no whit appear, but all be buried in his gravity.
Oh, name him not, let us not break with him, for he will never follow anything that other men begin.
Then leave him out.
Indeed, he is not fit.
Shall no man else be touched, but only Caesar?
Decius, well urged. I think it is not meet Mark Antony, so well beloved of Caesar, should outlive Caesar. We shall find of him a shrewd contriver, and You know, his means, if he improve them, may well stretch so far to annoy us all, which to prevent let Antony and Caesar fall together.
Our course will seem too bloody, Caius Cassius, to cut the head off and then hack the limbs, like wrath in death and envy afterwards. For Antony is but a limb of Caesar. Let's be sacrificers, but not butchers, Caius. We all stand up against the spirit of Caesar. Nice. Thank you, Seneshki. And in the spirit of men, there is no blood. Oh, that we then could come by Caesar's spirit and not dismember Caesar. But alas, Caesar must bleed for it. And, gentle friends, let's kill him boldly, but not wrathfully. Let's carve him as a dish fit for the gods, not hew him as a carcass fit for hounds. And let our hearts, as subtle masters do, stir up their servants to an act of rage, and after seem to chide them. This shall make our purpose necessary and not envious, which so appearing to the common eyes, we shall be called purgers. Oh no, hold on, I have to get my cord. Where is it? Oh. Oh, the drama. Can I make it in time? Okay, whew. All right, which so appearing to the common eyes, we shall be called purgers and not murderers. And for Mark Antony, think not of him, for he can do no more than Caesar's arm when Caesar's head is off.
Yet I fear him, for in the engrafted love he bears to Caesar.
Alas, good Cassius, do not think of him. If he loves Caesar, all that he can do is to himself. Take thought and die for Caesar. And that were much he should, for he is given to sports, to wildness, and to much company.
There is no fear in him. Let him not die, for he will live and laugh at this hereafter.
Great, great, thank you. Okay, so you can hear these conspirators going after, right, trying to figure out what the plan is. Again, talking with each other about what it means to be a man and how to stand up for what you believe in. Notice too that they're starting to get a little carried away. Like, we need to take Caesar down, obviously, but shouldn't we take down Mark Antony? Yeah, he's dangerous. And Brutus is like, no, we shouldn't be too excessive, right? We just need to stick to the target and not try to, you know, eliminate everyone else, right? So when Caesar's head is off, Caesar's arm, Mark Antony, won't be able to function. That's what Brutus thinks. Okay, good. We're gonna keep moving forward and take a look. There's two sequences, one at the end of the scene and the second in Act 2, Scene 2, where the women show up. So let's move forward with that. So at least we can get a little bit of that in today. I'm just gonna go back to the play. So in this next sequence, this is Portia and Brutus. So this is the end. Oh, I was in the right scene all along. So it's the end of Act 2, Scene 1. And Ellie will be reading Portia. And I'll keep going with Brutus. Will be line 253 to 333. Okay, and so, right, so the conspirators have come into Brutus's home. Portia is legitimately curious, and she's asking to be let in on things. So let's hear how she asks. Ellie, if you want to pick it up with Brutus, my lord.
Brutus, my lord.
Portia, what mean you? Wherefore rise you now? It is not for your health thus to commit your weak condition to the raw cold morning.
Nor for yours neither. You're ungently, Brutus, stole from my bed, and yesternight at supper you suddenly arose and walked about, musing, sighing, with your arms across, and when I asked you what the matter was, you looked upon me with ungentle looks. I urged you further, then you scratched your head, and too impatient stamped with your foot. Yet I insisted, yet you answered not, but with an angry wafter of your hand gave sign for me to leave you. So did I did, fearing to strengthen that impatience which seemed too much enkindle and withal, hoping it was but an effect of humor, which sometime hath his hour with every man. It will not let you eat, nor talk, nor sleep. And it can work so much upon your shape, and hath much prevailed on your condition. I should not know you, Brutus. Dear my lord, make me acquainted with the cause of your grief.
I am not well in health, and that is all.
Brutus is wise, and where he not in health, he would embrace the means to come by it.
Why, so I do, good Portia. Go to bed.
What? Oh, sorry. I
No worries.
accidentally almost started reading your lines. Is Brutus sick? And is it physical to walk unbraced and suck up the humors of the dank morning? What is Brutus sick? And will he steal out his wholesome bed to dare the vile cognation of the night and tempt the roomy, unpurged air to add unto his sickness? No, my Brutus, you have some sick offense within your mind, which by right and virtue of my place I ought to know of. And upon my knees I charm you by my once commended beauty, by all your vows of love, that great vow which did incorporate and make us one, that you unfold me, yourself, your half. Why are you heavy? And what men tonight have resorted to you? For here have been some 6 or 7 who did hide their face, even from the darkness.
Kneel not, gentle Portia.
I should not need. If you were gentle, Brutus, within the bond of marriage, tell me, Brutus, is it expected that I should know no secrets that appertain to you? Am I yourself? But if it were so, in any sort of lamination, to keep with you at meals, comfort your bed, and talk to you sometimes, dwell but in the shrubs, something, sorry. So, of good pleasure, if it be no more, Portia is Brutus' harlot, not his wife.
You are my true and honorable wife, as dear to me as are the ruddy drops that visit my sad heart.
If this were true, then I should know the secret. I grant I am a woman, but withal, a woman that Lord Brutus took as his wife. Grant, I am a woman, but withal, a woman well raptured, Cato's daughter. Think you I am no stronger than my sex, being fathered and so husband? Tell me your counsels. I will not disclose them. I have made strong proof of my consistency, giving myself a voluntary wound here in the thigh. Can I bear that with patience and not know my husband's secret?
Oh, you gods, render me worthy of this noble wife. Hark, hark, one knocks. Portia, go in a while, and by thy bosom shall partake the secrets of my heart. All my engagements I will construe to thee, all the charactery of my sad brows. Leave me with haste. Okay, great. Thanks, Ellie. Right, good. So I saw some folks have been adding to the chat. Feel free to chat. What did you notice about Portia's, about maybe some gender issues and the way Portia attempts to talk to Brutus? Yeah, I have a headache. Yeah. Yeah, he's in this conversation, he's kind of avoiding, right, Rosa? He's not bringing her in. She's asking him to bring her in. And she says, as your wife, I deserve to be, I'm you, right? We're married. That's what marriage means. I deserve to know what's important. But he's speaking honorably to her, but he's not telling her anything. Yeah, nice, Sanheshki. Her status is defined by him, right? So whatever he does affects her. she wants to know. She thinks she's got a right to know. Yeah, I don't know if you noticed, but what action does she take during that sequence? It's kind of crazy. She kneels. Yeah, she does kneel to him, right? And he's kind, like as you would, I suppose. No, honey, don't do that. But she does something else too.
I don't know if this is what you're referring to, but she's sort of like hesitant around him and like referring to him as like he's like gonna explode. Like, so something that she's gonna do is gonna like set him off, whereas like it's on her to not set him off as opposed to like on him to control his temper. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that's a really good observation, right? So she's being careful, kind of, she needs to have this conversation with him, but she's careful of the way she's doing it because she doesn't want to hurt him more than he's experiencing now. There's a moment where she takes a knife and she stabs her thigh. I'm just going to go back and see if I can grab it. It's right before the end of the section we just looked at. And he kind of sends her off, right? Because that's when the knocking happens. So she says something like, I have made strong proof of my constancy, giving myself a voluntary wound here in the thigh. Can I bear that with patience and not my husband's secrets, right? So she's trying to show that she can take pain, right? And that she's trustworthy. Yeah, what do you think about that? Or what do you think about some of her other argumentative strategies? Is it falling
Seems
into...
really manipulative.
Yeah, no, maybe unfortunately she needs to be because he's not going to tell her anything. Yeah, manipulative. So maybe like a woman, like a feminine kind of manipulation. I mean, I want to say the stabbing is kind of emotional.
It just makes me think when Kristen brought up that point, like when we read Macbeth my senior year of high school, we talked about Lady Macbeth and her levels of manipulation, and what my teacher pointed out, a lot of times in that time period, that's the only power they had.
Right.
So that's how they would exert power over it, and just her actions there pushing forward.
I think you're right, Ellie. I think that right, women don't have a public face at this time aside from as the wife of somebody. And so in order to have control over their environment, they have to kind of take action through manipulating their husbands, unfortunately, because they don't have their own authority to speak. Yeah. Well, and she claims authority not only from being the wife of Brutus, but from being the daughter of Cato, right? So she's well connected, she's noble. She's saying, if I'm connected to these men, I've got to be taken seriously, right? So she's flattering Brutus by saying that, you have to take me seriously because I'm not just your wife, I'm the wife of Brutus, and we all know who Brutus is, right? So she's doing a pretty good job of using reason as well as emotion, right? So making a good argument. And he promises when he sends her away that he's going to tell her, he's going to unburden himself to her and tell her all about it. But actually, I think he never gets there. So he's kind of busy. Great. Okay, we have just a couple minutes left. And let's just take a quick look at Act 2, Scene 2. I don't think we'll be able to read it just because we don't have enough time. So let me just show it. Whoops, did I do that right? There we go. Yeah, so folks who signed up to read today, thank you. I'll come back to you and get you to read another time. But just to call your attention, right? So there's a kind of interesting mirroring scene. We saw Brutus and Portia's asking to be included. And then right at the beginning of Scene 2, we see Caesar and his wife Calpurnia, right, who is the barren wife of Caesar in the first act. And all of these portents have been happening, right? The world's going crazy and there's earthquakes and lightning, and Calpurnia's like to Caesar, dude, you're staying home today. You're staying home from school. You're staying home from the Senate, right? Don't don't go there because it's not worth it, right? And initially, Caesar is agreeing with her. He doesn't want to go. But then, of course, Decius arrives and convinces him that if he doesn't go, like everybody wants to make him king, and if he doesn't go, they'll think he's weak, right? That he's not manly enough. And that he's been convinced by Calpurnia to stay at home. So there's all that kind of masculinity happening in that scene as well. Yeah, thanks, Anishki. I love that. It's fun to watch her describe him as an indoor water feature. Yeah, great. Great, great, great. Okay, so we're out of time today. Thank you for doing some gender analysis. If you like this kind of analysis, you can keep working with Julius Caesar, or you can do the same kind of stuff with Taming of the Shrew for the paper, if that's of interest to you. We'll pick it up on Thursday with Acts 3 and 4. And particularly, I think Act 3 is where there's a bunch of really famous speeches. So I think we'll focus quite a bit on those. So be on the lookout for them. So we're done for today, but I'm happy to answer any questions if people have them. So go ahead and ask or stick around. If not, I will see you Thursday.